His business associates called him Bill, but his family called him Russell. He was the youngest of 13 children. By the time he was 10 years old, his only brother Tom had left home. When he was 3 years old, his father died, so he was essentially the only man on the farm. He had 3 important jobs. One, in the summertime, was to take care of the 2 vegetable gardens that pretty much fed this large family. In the wintertime, his job was to hunt small game, to provide some fresh meat for the table from time to time. The third job, probably the most important, was to take care of their old mule, Jake, because after all, that's what they used to farm with. Well, as it turned out, Russell had no trouble with the vegetable gardens. He had a little trouble with the hunting. He often didn't want to go out and take care of old Jake. And so evening would often come, and he would be sitting with Lucille in the living room playing checkers when Mama would call out, "Russell, did you take care of old Jake yet?" "No, Mama." "Go do it." So up he'd get. Behind the door, on a nail driven into the wall, was a lantern, a carbide lantern. He'd pull that from the nail, go into the drawer, pull out the drawer in a can with some carbide. He'd put some carbide in there, a little water that would drip on the carbide. That would produce gas. He'd light the lantern and it would have light, and then outside he'd go. He hated it when he had to go across the hill to hunt up old Jake and drive him back to the barn, where he'd feed and water and put him down for the night. This went on and on. It was hard for him to kill small game, particularly rabbits. All he had was a little Stevens 410 breakdown single-shot hammer-action shotgun. And it's hard to see rabbits until they start running, and you've got to be a good shot to get them, and he'd often miss them. But on one of these nights when he's out hunting Jake, he noticed when he held up that lantern and he looked down next to the edge of the woods, he saw the reflection of Rabbit's eyes. And he got an idea. He thought, if I come out here at nighttime with a lantern, I can shoot those rabbits sitting, and I'll never miss. And so the next day he took that idea to the general store. The general store was run by a man that wasn't from those parts. He'd come in from Canada, folks said. His name was Johnny Buck. The kids often called him Uncle Buck. And he went to the general store one day and he stood around until it was empty, and he approached Uncle Buck. He said, "I think if you'll give me a dozen shotgun shells, I'll bring you 6 rabbits, give Mama 6 rabbits, and that'll pay for those shells." Johnny Buck said, "How you going to kill a dozen rabbits with a dozen shotgun shells? Ain't nobody that good a shot." "Ah," said Russell, "I done figured it out. I was out last night with the lantern hunting up old Jake, and I shined it up down next to the woods, and I could see the reflection of the light in those rabbits' eyes. I can shoot 'em sitting, and I won't ever miss with my little shotgun." Johnny Buck shook his head. He said, "You oughtn't to be shooting rabbits while they're sitting. It ain't fair." "Well, who cares about fair?" said Russell. "I don't care about fair. I just know that shotgun shells are expensive and I need to kill some rabbits." "Ah," said Johnny Buck, "shouldn't ought to be shooting rabbits a-sitting. The phantom rabbit just might get you." Russell looked at him kind of sideways. Said, "What do you mean, the phantom rabbit? What's the phantom rabbit?" "Oh," said Johnny Buck, "the phantom rabbit is a big giant rabbit that protects the other little rabbits. Now, he doesn't mind too much if you take those rabbits fair and square, but if you start to cheating, that phantom rabbit, he's just liable to get you because it's his job to protect the rabbits." Russell looked at him again and said, "You ever seen this phantom rabbit?" "I ain't never seen no phantom rabbit." Johnny Buck says, "Well, I'm not sure. I was out the other night and I saw something cross the road. It was so big, but it couldn't have been a bear. It was bigger than a bear. and it couldn't have been a deer. It was faster than a deer. I think it might have been the phantom rabbit. You better be careful out there doing what you're planning to do." "Ah," said Russell, "I don't believe what you're saying. Just give me a dozen shells. I'll bring you 6 rabbits in the morning to pay for them." So Johnny Buck reached in the counter, pulled out a dozen 410 shotgun shells 3 inches long, gave them to Russell, and Russell went on home. That night again, he was playing checkers with Lucille in the floor in the living room, had completely forgot about old Jake till Mama called out, "Russell, you take care of old Jake?" "No, Mama." And it was at that moment that Russell remembered what he was going to do. So he went in to a cigar box and he pulled out those 12 shotgun shells, stuck them in his pocket. Convinced Lucille to go with him. Took that little Stevens 410 breakdown single-shot hammer-action shotgun off the pegs over the fireplace. Took the carbide lantern from behind the door, got it all set up, and together they went outside. Lucille says, "What you going to do, Russell?" Russell said, "I'm going to go hunting rabbits, but I need you to come along with me because Uncle Buck told me something about a phantom rabbit, and I don't believe him, but I'm not completely sure." Lucille said, "Phantom rabbit?" And he told her the whole story. She says, "I don't want to be out here where there might be a phantom rabbit." It took Russell a while to talk Lucille into going with him. But they went on across the pasture up over the hill hunting Jake. Couldn't find him. Got up to the top of the hill, and Russell raised up that lantern down toward the woods to see if he could see some rabbits. And when he did, he saw 2 big reflected lights coming back at him. And Russell said to Lucille, "That must be the phantom rabbit. He's down there next to the woods. What we gonna do?" Lucille said, "Russell, you got to shoot him." Russell said, "All I got's this little Stevens 410 breakdown single-shot hammer-action shotgun. That's not going to kill him. It'll just make him mad." Lucille said, "We got nothing else to do. You got to shoot him." So Russell handed Lucille the lantern and said, "Hold it up high, Lucille." And so he picked up that little Stevens 410 single-shot breakdown hammer-action shotgun, and he held it to his shoulder, and he cocked that trigger back. And he aimed, and he aimed, and he aimed, and he aimed, and finally he put that gun down. Lucille said, "Russell, what's wrong? Shoot it." Russell said, I'm afraid I'm going to miss." Lucille said, "Please, Russell, what if he comes after us?" So Russell raises up that shotgun again, and he aims and aims and aims and aims, and finally put it down again. Lucille said, "Russell, what's wrong?" He said, "My arm's tired." Lucille said, "Russell, he might come at us any time. You better shoot him." So Russell raised that shotgun up one more time. He aimed and aimed and aimed and aimed, and finally he squeezed that trigger. Kaboom! Ah! Ah! Lucille screamed, "Russell, you done shot old Jake!" And sure enough, Russell had. He'd shot old Jake. Old Jake went running back toward the barn as fast as he could go. Russell said to Lucille, "Lucille, don't you tell Mama I shot old Jake. We'll hope he'll be okay." So they made their way back home, and they avoided Mama that night till the next morning. At dawn, Russell got up, went outside, looked in the barn, and sure enough, there was old Jake with his head hanging down. Red spots, probably a dozen of them all over his face, but fortunately a mule's eyeballs are kind of on the side of their head. And Russell never had any trouble going after Jake again after that. And he decided that even the possibility of the phantom rabbit wasn't worth shotgun shells.